All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a story that's playing out all over the country, that magnetic pull of the growing suburb. And to do it, we're using a really fascinating case study, Powell, Tennessee. So what's the real deal with living there? Let's jump in and find out. For so many people, the dream of moving to the suburbs starts with this one big question. Can I get more space for my money? It's that promise of a bigger house, a yard, but you're still connected to the city. It's a really compelling idea for sure, but it's only the beginning of the story. But of course, anyone who's actually looked into this knows it's never that black and white. Every single benefit seems to come with a trade-off. It creates this delicate balancing act that really shapes your day-to-day life. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to break down that balancing act piece by piece. Okay, so let's get right into it. And we're going to start with the thing that usually gets the ball rolling for most people, the money. We're breaking down what we're calling the value equation, what it costs, the space you get, and what your investment really buys you. So when you crunch the numbers in a place like Powell, you see this classic trade-off. On one side of the scale, you've got some serious financial upside, but on the other, you have some very real limits in the market, especially if you're looking for something on the higher end. The biggest pro? It's crystal clear. Your dollar just stretches further here. It's that simple. We're talking larger homes, bigger lots, especially when you compare it to some of the pricier areas next door. For a family that needs more room or someone moving from a really expensive state, this value is often just too good to pass up. Now, on the flip side, if what you're looking for is a true luxury home, top of the line everything, exclusive gated communities, all the premium amenities, well, the options in Powell are a lot more limited. So yeah, if you're in that top tier market, you might have to widen your search. Okay, so we've got the financial picture locked in, but let's be real, money's only one piece of the puzzle, right? The next big question is how all of this actually translates into your daily life. What does it feel like to live here day in and day out? And this is where things get interesting. When you talk about just getting around day to day, Powell is a total paradox. For a lot of people, it's super convenient, but that very convenience is what's bringing more people in, which leads to those inevitable growing pains. Ahem. Congestion. Okay, for a lot of folks, the commute is actually a huge plus. You've got easy access to major highways like I-75, which means getting to work in nearby cities can be surprisingly painless. And having a few different ways to get there, that's a lifesaver when traffic inevitably hits. And this right here, this quote just nails the central problem for any booming suburb. Infrastructure improvements often lag behind growth. It's such a simple statement, but the implications are huge. The new houses and families show up fast, but building bigger roads or new on-ramps, that takes years. And that gap, that's where you feel the growing pains every single day. And that friction, well, it leads us right to the con side of the list. Look, you're going to be in your car. A lot. This is a car-dependent community. There aren't a ton of sidewalks, and public transit is minimal. And as the area gets more popular, that just means more cars on the road, especially around rush hour and when school gets out. You see this exact same push and pull when it comes to your actual lifestyle. Basically, what you gain in private, personal space, you tend to trade for being close to public stuff like restaurants and shops. A lot of people move to Powell for exactly this reason. They're chasing the privacy that comes with a bigger yard, maybe a lot with some trees, and just more space between you and your neighbors. It's perfect if you want to do some gardening, have space for the kids to run around, or just, breathe. But, and there's always a but, right? That quiet space comes with a price, and that price is convenience. Powell has your basics covered for sure, but it doesn't have a big, walkable downtown full of restaurants or a giant shopping center. So for a date night or a big shopping run, yeah, you're probably hopping in the car and heading somewhere else. Okay, so we talked about the house, we've talked about the commute. What about the people, the community fabric? And surprise, surprise, we find another fascinating trade-off here. That amazing small-town feel versus some of the practical complications that can come with it. And this slide really shows the two sides of that coin. On one hand, you get that appeal of close-knit neighbors and this real shared identity. And on the other, you've got these really complicated systems bubbling just under the surface, like schools that families have to figure out. Ask anyone who lives in Powell, and they'll probably tell you about the amazing community feel. It really has that close-knit, small-town vibe where people actually know their neighbors. There's huge turnout for local school events and youth sports, and it all comes together to create this really friendly, supportive atmosphere. Now, for any family, a huge piece of that community puzzle is the school system. But this is where a super important concept comes into play: school zoning. And here's the thing you gotta understand: it's not about being in the right town, it's about being on the right street. Your specific address is what decides which school your kids go to. So here's the bottom line, and this is super important. Do not assume. You could have two houses just a few streets apart that are zoned for completely different schools. You absolutely have to double check the zoning for the specific address you're looking at. And get this, those lines can even change over time, which can affect your home's value down the road. So to kind of zoom out and put this all in context, here's a quick peek at how Powell stacks up with its neighbors. You've got Halls, which has similar prices but a different commute. If you want more land, you might look at Carnes. Or if you want an older, more established neighborhood that's a bit closer to the city, there's Fountain City. Every single one has its own unique recipe of pros and cons. All right, we've gone through the money, the lifestyle, the community. So after laying out all of these pros and all of these cons, how in the world do you decide if a place like this is actually right for you? Well, it really just boils down to you. It's all about your personal priorities. You've got to start by figuring out what you care about most. Is it the big yard or the short commute or being close to restaurants? Then you have to be really honest with yourself about the trade-offs you're willing to make. And one last thing, it really pays to look down the road and see what's planned for the area. And all this leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. So as our big cities just keep getting more and more expensive, are these growing suburbs like Powell, with all their amazing benefits and all their very real compromises, are they basically a blueprint for how a lot more of us are going to be living in the future?